Hello, dear students. Let's continue our path through identifying business opportunities. We have reviewed powerful concepts like the ones reviewed within Flash Foresight and the Strategic Toolkit. Said this, we are going to begin and end strong with strategy. In strategy, what counts is what would have to be true, not what is true. Strategic planners pride themselves on the rigor. Strategies are supposed to be driven by numbers and extensive analysis, and uncontaminated by bias, judgment, or opinion. The larger the spreadsheets, the more confident an organization is in its process. All those numbers, all those analyses feel scientific, and in the modern world, scientific equals good. Yet, if that's the case, why do the operations managers in most large and mid-sized firms dread the annual strategic planning ritual? Why does it consume so much time and have so little impact on company actions? Talk to those managers and you will most likely uncover a deeper frustration, the sense that strategic planning does not produce novel strategies. Instead, it perpetuates the status quo. And that, my friends, is in essence anti-strategy. One common reaction is to become explicitly anti-scientific, to throw off the shackles of organized number crunching and resort to off-site ideation events or online jam sessions intended to promote out-of-the-box thinking. These processes may result in radical new ideas, but more likely than not, those ideas cannot be translated into strategic choices that guide productive action. As one manager put it, there's a reason we keep those ideas outside the box. To break through the impasse, you have to change the way you think about making a successful strategy. In strategy, what counts is what would have to be true, not what is true. To put it in scientific terms, developing a winning strategy involves the creation and testing of novel cause-effect hypotheses and the identification of what must be different about the world for those hypotheses to work. And the structured development of novel hypotheses is as much scientific process as a structured analysis of data. In this lecture, I laid out a 7-step approach to strategy making anchored in the structured formulation of a set of well-articulated hypotheses, or strategic possibilities better called, for strategies to choose between. It examines what would have to be true about the world for each possibility to be supported. Only then does it unleash the power of analysis to determine which of what would have to be true is most feasibly attainable. Step 1. Move from issues to choice. Conventional strategy making tends to focus on problems or issues, such as declining profits, or market share, or cost-related issues. As long as this is the case, the organization will fall into the trap of investigating data related to the issues rather than exploring and testing possible solutions. A simple way to get strategists to avoid that trap is to require them to define two mutually exclusive options that could resolve the issue in question. Once you have framed the problem as a choice, any choice, Your analysis and emotions will focus on what you have to do next, not on describing or analyzing the challenge. The possibilities based approach therefore begins with the recognition that the organization must make a choice and that the choice has consequences. For the management team, this is the proverbial crossing of the Rubicon, the step that starts with the strategy making process. A great example. In the late 1990s, when P&G was contemplating becoming a major player in the global beauty care sector, it had a big issue. It lacked a credible brand in skincare, the largest and most profitable segment of the sector. All it had was Oil of Olay, a small down-market brand with an aging consumer base. P&G crossed its Rubicon and laid out two possibilities. It could attempt to dramatically transform Oil of Olay into a worthy competitor of brands like L'Oreal, Clarins, and Le Prairie, or it could spend billions of dollars to buy a major existing skincare brand. This framing helped managers internalize the magnitude of what was at stake. At that point, P&G turned from contemplating an issue to facing a serious choice. And that, my friends, is one of the essences of strategy. Not just analyzing the past, the numbers, the data, but facing one, two, or three serious choices and taking action on them. Step 2. Generate strategic possibilities. Having recognized that a choice needs to be made, you can now turn to the full range of possibilities you should consider. These may be versions of the options already identified. For example, P&G could try to grow Oil of Olay in its current price tier or take it upmarket, or it could seek to buy the German company that owns Nivea or pry Clinique out of the hands of Still. Possibilities might also exist outside initial options. For instance, P&G could extend its successful cosmetic brand CoverGirl into skincare and build a global brand on that platform. Constructing strategic possibilities, especially ones that are genuinely new, is the ultimate creative act in business. No one in the rest of the beauty industry would have imagined P&G completely reinventing Olay and boldly going head to head against leading prestige brands. To create such creative options, you need a clear idea of what continues and constitutes a possibility. You also need an imaginative yet grounded team and a robust process for managing debate. Desired output. A possibility is essentially a happy story that describes how a firm might succeed. Each story lays out where the company plays in its market and how it wins there. It should have internally consistent logic, but it need not be probed at this point. As long as we can imagine that it could be valid, it makes the cut. Characterizing possibilities as stories that do not require proof helps people discuss what might be viable but does not yet exist. It is much easier to tell a story about why a possibility could make sense than to provide data on the odds that will it succeed. A common temptation is to sketch out possibilities only at the highest level, but a motto, go global, or a goal, be number one, does not constitute a strategic possibility. We push teams to specify in detail the advantage they aim to achieve or leverage, the scope across which the advantage applies, and activities throughout the value chain that could deliver the intended advantage across a targeted scope. Otherwise, it is impossible to unpack the logic underlying a possibility and to subject the possibility to subsequent tests. In the CoverGirl possibility, the advantage would come from CoverGirl's strong brand and existing consumer base, combined with P&G research and development and global go-to-market capabilities. The scope would be limited to the younger demographic at the heart of the current CoverGirl consumer base, and it would need to build internationally from North America, where the brand was strong. The key activities would include leveraging CoverGirl's stable of model and celebrity endorsers. Managers often ask, how many possibilities should we generate? The answer varies according to the context. Some industries offer few happy stories. There are simply not a lot of good alternatives. Others, particularly ones in ferment or with numerous customer segments, have many potential directions. I find that most teams consider 3 to 5 possibilities in depth. On one aspect of this question, I am adamant the team must produce more than one possibility. Otherwise, it never really started the strategy making process because it didn't see itself as facing a choice. Analyzing a single possibility is not conducive to produce optimal action, or in fact, any action at all. I also insist that the status quo or current trajectory be among the possibilities considered. This forces the team in later stages to specify what must be true for the status quo to be viable, thereby eliminating the common implicit assumption. Worst case, we can just keep doing what we're already doing. The status quo is sometimes a path to decline. By including it among the possibilities, a team makes it subject to investigation and potential doubt. The team at P&G surfaced 5 strategic possibilities in addition to the status quo. One was to abandon oil of Olay and acquire a major global skincare brand. A second was to keep oil of Olay positioned where it was as an entry-priced mass market brand and to strengthen its appeal to current older customers by leveraging R&D capabilities to improve its wrinkle reduction performance. A third was to take oil of Olay into the prestige distribution channels, department stores and specialty beauty shops as an upscale brand. A fourth was to completely reinvent Olay as a prestige-like brand that would appeal more broadly to younger women, aged 35 to top 50, but be bold in traditional mass channels by retail pioneers willing to create a masstige experience with a special display section. A fifth was to extend the CoverGirl brand to skincare. The people. The group tasked with dreaming up strategic possibilities should represent a diversity of specialties, backgrounds, and experiences. Otherwise, it is difficult to generate creative possibilities and to do flesh out each one in sufficient detail. I find it useful to include individuals who did not create and therefore are not emotionally bound to the status quo. This usually implies that Promises junior executives will participate. I also find that individuals from outside the firm, preferably outside the industry, often lend the most original ideas. Finally, I believe it's crucial to include operation managers, not just staff members, in the process. This not only deepens practical wisdom, but also builds early commitment to and knowledge of the strategy that is ultimately chosen. If you show me a company where the planners are different from the doers. I will show you a company where what gets done is different from what was planned. Optimal group size varies amongst organizations and their structures and their cultures. Companies with a culture of inclusion, for example, should assemble a large group. If you go this route, use breakout groups to discuss the specific possibilities. A group larger than 8 or 10 people tends to be self-censoring. It's usually not a good idea to have the most senior person serve as a leader. She will have a difficult time convincing the others that she is not playing her usual role as boss. Instead, choose a respected lower level insider who is not perceived as having a strong point of view on which course should be chosen, or tap an outsider facilitator who has some experience within the firm or the industry. This is very important. The rules. Once selected, the possibility generators must commit themselves to separating their first step, the creation of possibilities, from the subsequent steps of testing and selecting. Managers with crucial minds naturally tend to reach each new idea with a long list of reasons why it won't work. The leader must constantly remind the group that ample time for skepticism will come later. For now, it must suspend judgment. If anyone persists with critique, the leader should require him to reframe it as a condition and table it for discussion in the next step. For example, the critique, customers will never accept differential pricing, becomes a condition. This possibility requires that customers accept differential pricing. It's particularly important that the leader not shut down the possibilities early. If that happens, it's open season on all possibilities, and removing an option about which a particular team member feels strongly may cause that person to withdraw from the process. Many management teams try to generate strategic possibilities in a single off-site brainstorming session. Such sessions are useful, especially if they are held at an unusual occasion that gets people out of their accustomed routines and habits of mind. But I also have to say that teams benefit from spreading the possibility generation process over some time so that individuals have an opportunity to reflect, think creatively, and build on ideas. It is perhaps most effective to start by asking each person to spend 30 to 45 minutes sketching out their 3 to 5 or more stories. The stories do not need to be detailed, they should truly be sketches. After this exercise, the group or breakout groups fleshes out the initial possibilities. Possibility generation centers on creativity, and many techniques purport to boost creativity. I found three kinds of probing questions to be especially useful. Inside out questions start with the company, assets, and capabilities, and then reasons outward. What does this company do especially well that parts of the market might value and that might produce a superior wedge between buyer value and costs? Outside in questions look for openings in the market. What are the understand and underserved needs or seen strategic factors? What are the needs that customers find hard to express? And what gaps have competitions and competitors left? For outside in questions, use analogical reasoning. What would it take to be the Google, the Apple, or the Walmart of this market? You will know that you have a good set of possibilities for further work if two things prove to be true. First, that the status quo doesn't look like a brilliant idea. At least one other possibility intrigues the group enough to make it really question the existing order. Second, at least one possibility makes most of the group uncomfortable. It is sufficiently far from the status quo that the group questions whether it would be at all doable or safe. If one or both of these don't hold, it is probably time for another round of possibility generation. The uncomfortable possibility of PNG was the fourth option described above. It involved transforming a weak, low-end brand into a more desirable player that could compete with upmarket department store products and then creating an entirely new masstige segment that mass retailers would enthusiastically support. Step 3. Specify the conditions for success. The purpose of this step is to specify what must be true for each possibility to be a terrific choice. Note that this step is not intended for arguing what is true. It is not intended to explore or assess the soundness of the logic behind the various possibilities, or to consider data that may or may not support the logic. That comes later. Any consideration of evidence at this point detracts from the process. The importance of this distinction cannot be overstated. When the discussion of a possibility centers on what is true, the person most skeptical about a possibility attacks it vigorously, hoping to knock it out of contention. The originator defends it, powering arguments in order to protect its viability. Tempers rise, statements become more extreme, and relationships are strained. Meanwhile, little of either opponent's logic is revealed to the other. If instead the dialogue is about what would have to be true, then the skeptic can say, for me to be confident in this possibility, I would have to know that consumers will embrace this sort of offering. That is a very different sort of statement from that will never work. It helps the proponent understand the skeptic reservations and develop the proof to overcome them. It also makes the skeptic specify the exact source of the skepticism, rather than issue a blanket denunciation. I've helped develop a process for surfacing the conditions that have to be true for a possibility to be an attractive strategy. The conditions fall into 7 categories relating to the industry, customer value, business model, and competitors. Managers should begin by clearly spelling out the strategic possibility under consideration before moving to a two-stage discussion. Generate a list. The aim here is to enumerate all the conditions that need to hold true for everyone in the room to be able to honestly say, I feel confident enough to make this possibility a reality. The conditions should be expressed as declarative rather than conditional statements. For example, channel partners will support us, not channel partners would have to support us. This helps paint a positive picture of the possibility, one that will be inviting to the group if the conditions actually hold. You must make sure that the individual who proposed the possibility under review does not dominate this conversation. Any condition that is put forward should be added to the list. The person putting it forward should simply be asked to explain why the condition would be necessary for him to be confident. He should not be challenged about the truth of the condition. When each member of the group has had a chance to add conditions to the list, the facilitator should read the list aloud and ask the group, if all these conditions were true, would you advocate for and support this choice? If everyone says yes, it's time to move to the next step. If any members say no, they must be asked, what additional condition would enable you to answer yes? This line of questioning should continue until every member replies affirmatively. Once again, during this step, expressing opinions about whether or not conditions are truly should be strictly prohibited. The point is simply to ferret out what would have to be true for every member of the group to feel cognitively and emotionally committed to each possibility under consideration. It is important to treat the current strategy in this way as well. I recall one discussion a number of years ago about the status quo option. Toward the end, the president of the company leaped out of his seat and sprinted from the room. When he returned 10 minutes later, his colleagues asked whether he was okay. He explained that the discussion had made him see how logically weak the status quo was. The reason he had raced out was to cancel a multi-million-dollar initiative in support of the status quo. The go, no-go deadline was that very day. With the list. The previous exercise typically overshoots, and the list of conditions crosses the line between must have and nice to have. After finishing the list of conditions, the group should take a break and then review the items asking, if every condition but this one held true, would you eliminate the possibility or still view it as viable? If the answer is the former, the condition is a must-have and should be maintained. If it is the latter, it is a nice to have and should be removed. The goal here is to ensure that the list of conditions is truly a binding set. To this end, once you're finished reviewing, you should ask, if all these conditions were true, would you advocate for and support this choice? If any member says no, then the group needs to return to the first stage discussion and add any necessary conditions that were initially overlooked or mistakenly removed. After arriving at a full set of possibilities and ensuring that all must-have conditions are attached to each, the group needs to bring its options to the executives whose approval will be required to ratify the final choice and to any other colleagues who might stand in the way. For each possibility, the group needs to ask these people the same question. It asks its members, if these conditions were shown to hold true, would you choose this possibility? If not, what additional conditions would you include? The goal is to make sure that the conditions for each possibility are well specified in the eyes of everyone with a say in the choice before analysis ensues. Step 4. Identify the barriers to choice. Now it's time to cast a critical eye on the conditions. The task is to assess which ones you believe are least likely to hold true. They will define the barriers to choosing that possibility. Begin by asking group members to imagine that they could buy a guarantee that any particular condition will hold true. To which condition would they apply it? The condition they choose is by inference the biggest barrier to choosing the possibility under consideration. The next condition to which they would apply a guarantee is the next biggest barrier, and so on. The ideal output is an ordered list of barriers to each possibility, 2 or 3 of which really worry the group. If there is a disagreement about the ordering of particular conditions, you should rank them as equal. Pay close attention to the member who is most skeptical that a given condition will hold true. That person represents the greatest obstacle, and in the case of a problematic possibility, an extremely valuable obstacle to the selection and pursuit of the option. Members must be encouraged to raise, not suppress their concerns, even if only one person is concerned about a given condition. The condition must be kept on the list. Otherwise, he would be within the heights to dismiss the final analysis. If the skepticism of every member is drawn out and taken seriously, all will feel confident in the process and the outcomes. When the P&G Beauty Care team reviewed the 9 conditions, it had come up with for the lay mastiche possibility. The members felt confident that 6 would hold. The potential consumer segment was big enough to be worth targeting. The segment was at least as structurally attractive as the current mass market skin care segment. P&G could produce the product at a cost that would permit a somewhat lower price than those of key lower-end prestige players. It was capable of building retailer partnerships if retailers liked the idea. Prestige competitors would not copy the strategy, and mass competitors could not copy the strategy. However, 3 conditions worried the team in descending order. 1. That mass channel consumers would accept a new, significantly higher starting price point. 2. That mass channel players could be game to create a new mastiche segment. And 3. That P&G could bring together prestige-like brand positioning, product packaging, and in-store promotion elements in the mass retail channel. Step 5. Design tests for the barrier conditions. Once you identify and order the key barrier conditions, the group must test each other one to see whether it holds true. The test may involve surveying 1,000 customers or speaking to a single supplier. It may entail crunching thousands of numbers or avoiding any quantifiers at all. The only requirement is that the entire group believe that the test is valid and can form the basis for rejecting the possibility in question or generating commitment to it. The member who is most skeptical about a given condition should take the lead in designing and applying the test for it. This person will typically have the highest standard of proof. If she is satisfied that the condition has passed the test, everyone else will be satisfied. The risk, of course, is that the skeptic might set an unachievable standard. In practice, this does not happen for 2 reasons. First, people demonstrate extreme skepticism largely because they don't feel heard. In a typical buying process, concerns are treated as roadblocks to be pushed aside as quickly as is feasible. The possibilities-based approach ensures that individuals with concerns both feel and actually are heard. The second reason is the specter of mutually assured destruction. Though I may have serious doubts about possibility A, I likewise possibility B. You, on the other hand, have few doubts about possibility A, but have serious qualms about choosing possibility B. I get to set the test for the barrier conditions for possibility A, but I saw with the knowledge that you will be setting the tests for possibility B. If I set too high a bar, you will surely do the same. Being fair and sensible is, then, the smartest approach. Step 6. Conduct the tests. I typically advise structuring this step according to what I call the lazy person's approach to choice, testing conditions in the reverse order of the group's confidence. That is, the condition the group feels is least likely to hold up is tested first. If the group suspicion is right, the possibility at hand can be eliminated without any further testing. If that condition passes the test, the condition with the next lowest likelihood of confirmation is tested, and so on. Because testing is often the most expensive and time-consuming part of the process, the lazy person approach can save enormous resources. Typically, at this step, you bring in people from outside the strategy team, consultants or experts in relevant functional or geographic units who can help fine-tune the conduct the test you have prioritized. This will be your part. You will be the consultant or the expert in this strategic planning. It is important to ensure that they concentrate solely on testing. You are not asking them to revisit the conditions. In fact, one beauty of the possibilities-based approach is that it enables you to focus outside resources that may be costly and time-consuming. This approach differs profoundly from the process followed by most strategic consultants, who conduct a relatively standard suite of analyses in parallel. That generates a lot of expensive analysis, much of which turns out to be not essential or even useful in decision making. This is a typical approach of the big consultings like BCG, McKinsey, Bain, etc. Furthermore, depth is sacrificed for breadth. Analyses are a mile wide and an inch deep because the cost of deep analysis across the board would be prohibitive. To generate choice and commitment, managers need analysis that is an inch wide and a mile deep, targeting the concerns that could prevent the group from choosing an option and exploring those areas thoroughly enough to meet the group standard of proof. The possibilities-based approach permits this. For the P&G Beauty Care team, the most challenging condition for the LA Mastige possibility relate to pricing. The test of the condition showcased the ability of a truly scientific, hypothesis-driving approach to generate strategies that are both unexpected and successful. Joe Listrom, Olay's Research and Development Manager, explains how it went. We started the test, the new Olay product, a premium price point of $12.99 to $18.99, and got very different results, he says. At $12.99, there was a positive response and a reasonably good rate of purchase intent. But most who signaled a desire to buy at $12.99 were mass shoppers. Very few department store shoppers were interested at that price point. Basically, we were training people up from within the channel. At $15.99, purchase intent dropped dramatically. At $18.99, it went back up again, way up. So $12.99 was really good. $15.99 not so good. $18.99 great. The team learned that at $18.99, consumers were crossing over from prestige department and specialty stores to buy Olay in discount, drug and grocery stores. That price point sent exactly the right message for the department store shopper. The product was a great value but still credible expensive. For the mass shopper, the premium price signified that the product must be considerably better than anything else on the shelf. In contrast, $15.99 was in no man's land for a mass shopper, expensive without signaling differentiation, and for prestige shopper not expensive enough. These differences were quite fine. Had the team not focused so carefully on building and applying robust tests for multiple price points, the findings might never have emerged. It is important to understand that tests cannot eliminate all uncertainty. Even the best performing possibility will entail some risk. That is why it is so crucial to set testable conditions for the status quo. The team then clearly sees that the status quo is not free of risk. Rather than compare the best performing possibility with a non-existent risk-free option, the team can compare the risk of the leading option with the risk of the status quo and reach a decision in that context. Step 7. Make the choice. In traditional strategy making, Finally, choosing a strategy can be difficult and acrimonious. The decision makers usually go off-site and try to frame their binders of much discussed market research as strategic options. With the stakes high and the logic for each option never clearly articulated, such meetings often end up as negotiations between powerful executives with strong perceptions and preconceptions, and once the meetings are concluded, those who are skeptical of the decision begin to undermine it. With a possibilities-based approach, the choice-making step becomes simple, even anticlimactic. The group needs only to review the analytical test results and choose the possibility that faces the fewest serious barriers. Often a strategy chosen in this way is surprisingly bold and would most likely have been strangled at birth in the traditional process. Consider the Olay case. P&G ended up deciding to launch an upmarket product called Olay Total Effects by 1899. In other words, the brand, once dismissed as oil for old ladies, was transformed into a prestige-like product line at a price point close to that of department store brands. And it worked. Mass retail partners loved the product and saw new shoppers buying at new price point in their stores. Beauty magazine editors and dermatologists saw real value in the well-priced, effective product line. The massive strategy succeeded beyond expectations. P&G could have been happy with a billion-dollar global skincare brand, but in less than a decade the Olay brand surpassed 2.5 billion in annual sales by spawning a series of boutique product lines, starting with Total Effects and following with Regeneris, Definity and Pro-X, that attracted more prestige shoppers and commanded prices eventually reaching 50. Said this, let's make a reflection conclusion, the ones that I would like to see in your analysis, in your reflections. Laid out neatly on paper, the possibilities-based approach outlined here sounds easy, but many managers struggle with it, not because the mechanics are hard, but because the approach requires at least three fundamental shifts in mindset. First, in the early steps, they must avoid asking, "What should we do?" and instead ask, "What might we do?" Managers, especially those who pride themselves on being decisive, jump naturally to the former question and get restless when tackling the latter. Second, in the middle steps, managers must shift from asking, "What do I believe?" to asking, "What would I have to believe?" This requires a manager to imagine that each possibility, including ones he does not like, is a great idea, and such a mindset does not come naturally to most people. It's needed, however, to identify the right tests for a possibility. And finally, by focusing a team on pinpointing the critical conditions and tests, the possibilities-based approach forces managers to move away from asking, "What is the right answer?" and concentrate instead on, "What are the right questions? What specifically must we know in order to make a decision good?" In our experience, most managers are better at advocacy of their own views than an inquiry, especially about others' views. The possibilities-based approach relies on and fosters a team's ability to inquire, and genuine inquiry must lie at the heart of any process that aims to be scientific. Said this, my fellow students, thank you for listening and watching. Please keep in mind this great strategic approach, which is one of the greatest approaches that I have taught. It is a carefully step-by-step guide in order to assess the validity of strategic options. I will be putting the examples of the lay option and the general process. So, review it, and go through your weekly activity. Thank you and goodbye. This was Victor and Romo.